Hello and welcome to ChatDPS. This week we're talking about the recent attack on Victoria's Secret, a local authority hack, and lastly, a scam affecting major companies that on the face of it look quite legitimate. We let you know how to spot, how to avoid this particularly sophisticated scam. Hi Adam, how are we doing? Hope you've had a great week.
Yeah, very well. Thanks for having me again, Nick.
No, thank you for joining us. This is great. So the first story that we've chosen to talk about this week is about Victoria's Secret, and not for all the wrong reasons, as you may be getting along. This is a story from Bleeping Computer, and it was released on the 13th of June. So Bleeping Computer are saying that Victoria's Secret have restored all of their critical systems. Following an incident on the 24th of May that closed all corporate systems and the e-commerce website. The company operates 1,380 stores across 70 different companies, and average net sales in the first quarter of around 1.35 billion, with an annual turnover expected around 6.3 billion US dollars. Reporting to the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the company disclosed that all restored systems are now fully operational, that is working with external experts to assess the impact of the cyber impact. Victoria's Secret believes the incident will have no material impact on its yearly fiscal results, something that I'm kind of interested in. But they are saying that they may incur expenses related to the attack. I mean, Adam, what might those sort of expenses look like from your perspective?
So there's a bunch from there. So first of all, before the basic expenses, there's delayed earnings, loss of productivity. They're all going to tell a story that might be a little bit different to the material impact. But there's also the incident response, the forensic analysis. Depending on how deep this attack had gone, that can cost quite a lot, in the millions of dollars, to go through that whole process of recovery. So it'll be interesting to see how much that actually hits them, especially the delayed earnings piece, because they were down for nearly two
Yeah.
weeks. So
Yeah,
it was
so it's
quite a
kind of like
while.
a little bit of corporate doublespeak going on here. You know, it's not going to affect our yearly earnings. Yes, so the earnings are going to be around about the $6.3 billion again, but the costs are going to have increased quite substantially, maybe.
Yeah, and I would assume that a lot of their sales comes from their distribution network as opposed to directly from themselves. So the fact that they
Mm,
got hit, it might be the percentage. So they might have 20% through their own entities and then 80% through their distribution channels.
right. Okay. So, but Victoria's Secret clearly had a response plan, which is to their credit, right? I mean, and they've closed all the unauthorized network access, and third-party experts were engaged quickly.
Yep.
And despite stating that they see no material impact on financial forecasts, they're still assessing the impact. So clearly, some things could still come to light.
100%.
Um,
This was one of
and
the
I,
great shows that if you actually have a response plan, like they went dark, right? But their response plan kind of lit their way back into the limelight. They were able to control the
yeah,
narrative and be on top of what's happened and communicate correctly.
I'm glad you said that, because that is something that actually struck me, was the fact that these guys were clearly prepared. They'd done their desktop exercises. They'd ran it through. They knew exactly where to start. They knew exactly where to finish. They finished up where the systems were back up and running in what appears to be relatively quick time. And if you compare it to somebody like Marks and Spencers, that quite clearly didn't
Yep.
have a plan and didn't have any playbook to follow. These guys are really sort of like, they're out there as an organization that really does understand what it is to come under stress, right?
Yep, which I think will also add to the bottom line not going down so far. I think the fact is
Yeah.
they won't have lost as much trust as they could have, and therefore people will continue to use the same habits.
Yeah, so that reputation matters thing really does come into play here.
100%.
So yeah, so whilst nobody's really claimed responsibility, there's been a lot of recent activity regarding global retailers, and there's a lot of speculation around the fact that these are all linked to our old friends Scattered Spider and Dragon Force.
Yes.
So Dior, Adidas, Cartier, and then think Harrods, Co-op, and Marks and Spencer in terms of sort of like who these groups have actually been and torn apart really.
Yeah, they put a lot of time into learning which verticals are the softest to attack.
Mm.
So from a criminality perspective, they spend a lot of time to research the different areas that will give them the most bang for buck. And fashion is an interesting one because recently fashion has become a direct to market business model, and they
Right.
hold on to quite a lot of information because they have their loyalty programs, and as retail has kind of changed, they now house an awful lot of data, and this shows that the large houses are getting looked at because they probably haven't had as much scrutiny. They don't have a HIPAA equivalent, or they don't have
Yeah.
a ASD Essential 8 equivalent for
Yeah.
the fashion industry.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, I mean, well worth doing. Moving on, Oxford City Council suffers a breach exposing 2 decades worth of data. This is again from Bleeping Computer on the 22nd of June. So very recent and just yesterday, in fact. Oxford City Council in the UK warns it suffered a data breach where attackers accessed personal data from legacy systems. This is called widespread ICT services disruption. This hack appears to have exposed personal information of people who worked at elections between 2001 and 2022. So there's quite a lot of significant legacy data that appears
Yeah.
to be coming to light here. Yeah.
100%. And there's a number of questions on this as why they had the data for so long. The thing that's interesting about this one though is this was caused because of a legacy system that they'd moved away from but never turned off. So
Yeah.
this is one of those cases where you've got you're going to be left behind because of your legacy systems, and if you're not protecting your past, you're risking your future. And finishing those projects is so important.
That's an exceptional point. I mean, one of the things that sort of springs to mind here is the fact that, particularly in Australia, the councils are always screaming about the fact that they're strapped for cash and, they need to make, efficiency savings and so on and so forth. And that for years, they were excluded from the data privacy,
Yep.
legislation. I'm just wondering about the councils and how they're going to be able to respond here in Australia. I mean, to something like this. I mean, this is a fairly significant breach, right?
Yeah, 100%, especially the smaller councils. Some of the bigger councils are finally getting to a good point on their catch-up trip. But yeah, across the boards, this breach kind of shows the cost of that delay, I think.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's a significant point. Yeah.
Because cyber risk
Okay.
doesn't care about your budget, right? It only cares about your blind spots. So,
Ah, yeah. Your budget really means very little. It's how you're protecting that data, right?
yep.
Um, right. So moving into the last story that we've got, this is something that was reported in the Register over the weekend. Netflix, Apple, Bank of America websites hijacked with fake help desk numbers. You've been seeing this all over the news, right? So scammers are hijacking the search results of people needing 24/7 support from Apple, HP, Microsoft, Netflix, and PayPal. So this is an attempt to trick victims into handing over personal financial information, according to Malware Bytes
Yep.
Senior Director of Research Jerome Segura. It's a variation on search engine optimization or search poisoning, in which the attackers manipulate the search engine algorithms to provide or promote what is usually a malicious website masquerading as the real deal. So there's something quite unique about this, though, isn't there, Adam, that you were kind of interested about, how you could describe it to people? Because what I'm really keen to do is to make sure that people understand what they can do
Yeah. So
that
this
might
this
have
one
worked.
this one was really interesting because they didn't actually use fake websites. So for
Yeah.
this specifically, they utilized some of the code, and they were just very clever in how Google utilizes the search engine and how to do things. And what they did was you actually went to, let's say it was Apple, you went to the correct Apple support site, but because of the link that you clicked, it actually injected just the phone number to change. So then you went to their end. You were on the legitimate right site, and if you had gone to apple.com/support, yourself, it would have the right ones. So it was impossible for the brand to know that this was happening. And this is very similar to the old like Google Ads attacks that were done in the past as well. You do a Google search, there's an ad in the side, and it has malicious code that automatically runs just because it's been loaded on your computer. You don't have to click. Those type of things is very smart.
Yeah, so I mean, Robert and I have been talking for months about the fact that, sort of like, I suppose in some respects, taking the mickey out of the fact that every single hack appears to be a sophisticated, sort of attack and an assault upon, these victims, these victim sites, Optus and so on and so forth. This really is quite sophisticated, yeah?
100%. And we use the term sophisticated for people to understand it's because they succeed because they're really simple and really believable. And that's where we use the term sophisticated.
Yeah. Okay. Um, okay. Well, that was Chat DPS for this week. Anything to finish off with, Adam?
I think just on this, with all of the breaches that's been happening, every breach is a business story and every response is a leadership test. And we need to let people realize this a bit more on both sides of the spectrum.
That's perfect. What a great way to finish. So thank you so much for joining us again. I really appreciate it and look forward to catching up with you very soon.
Take care all.
That was Chat DPS for this week.